change is hard. Not having a community to me is probably the hardest thing. Like I didn't have a support system of any kind. I don't think I've ever thought about this, but I'm really proud of myself. I had no idea what I was doing. Like none. And you just are strong enough to do it.
Welcome to Somewhere Unfamiliar. I am your host, Alina, and since we are all new here, this podcast grew out of my own experience of moving around the world and realizing how exciting and also lonely it can feel to start from scratch in a new place, far from your friends and family. This is a space for honest conversations about identity, belonging, community, and the strength it takes to create a new sense of home. I really hope these conversations resonate with you like they did with me and remind you that you are not alone. I loved this conversation with Nadine. She's one of the coolest people I've ever met, and it's extra special because this was my very first interview. She's lived between Lebanon and the US, questioning identity and what home really means, and at one point she had to leave a war zone almost overnight. She's a fighter. She pushed through the lonely, uncertain parts and rebuilt her life anyway. If you've just moved or you're starting over somewhere new, this one's for you. A reminder that you don't need all the answers. You just need to believe in yourself and trust that you're strong enough to keep going. You are from Lebanon and you moved here quite a while ago.
Yeah.
And you've been living in LA ever since, but you do miss aspects of your home, and that's pretty much all I know. So I'm excited to learn more about your story and your journey from Beirut to LA.
Yeah. Well, my journey, I feel like, starts before that. So I was born in New Jersey. Yes, surprise. I lived in Jersey till I was 12. So my dad started working in Saudi Arabia when I was maybe like 9 or 10. I'm an only child, so my mom and I were kind of on our own in New Jersey. My parents are originally Lebanese, and my dad had an opportunity to move from Saudi to Beirut. And when that happened, he basically came home and my parents presented me with this like super fun idea to move to Lebanon when I was 12. Naturally, I was pretty mortified. When you're 12, your friends are your whole world. I had been to Lebanon once when I was 8. Hated it because I got sick. I didn't speak the language. I knew no one. So it was super dramatic. I called all my friends and it was like the world was ending, that I was leaving. And at the time, my parents positioned it as, we'll go there for a year. Let my dad do this thing, and then he'll, move up in the ranks and potentially move back to the US or something. So I think that was all a ruse to just get me there. But that was in 1996. And now, unfortunately, you know my age. But yeah. So we moved there, and it was a pretty significant transition. I think the fact that I didn't speak the language was especially hard, but my parents did a lot to kind of help me acclimate, to just help me love it. I ended up going to an American school, so everybody spoke English, and the system was somewhat the same. I think within a few months, it felt okay. Like I started school. We obviously did not stay for 1 year. I graduated from high school, and then at that time, I had said, all right, I'm going to go back to the US and go to university. And so I applied and I got into USC and was very excited about that because I would have an opportunity to come to California. And long story short, that didn't happen because my dad explained how much cheaper it would be if I stayed in Lebanon for college. And because of a program I did in high school, I was able to skip my freshman year of college if I stayed in Beirut. So I did that. I went to the American University of Beirut for 3 years. I graduated. I got a job. So at this point, I'm 22 and a war broke out in Lebanon. That was 20 years ago.
Wow. I don't think I knew that you were born in New Jersey. So I am loving this. Okay.
Yes.
Obviously, the choice from New Jersey to Beirut was not yours, but you did make a significant move. Do you remember what it was like, how you felt at that age moving to Beirut and also having to start from scratch?
I definitely remember because I remember how dramatic it felt. In hindsight, 12 is actually pretty young when you're 12, you think you're, a grown up and you know everything. I made friends very quickly, so I was really lucky for that. I think I was still like just young enough that it was easy to make friends. 13, 14-year-old girls are probably much harder. So I think I was kind of lucky because I was still 12. So making friends kind of changed things for me. I also got into sport, and that was a huge help. I started playing volleyball and basketball. I eventually was on like the teams at school, and that became like a big part of my world. I learned both French and Arabic, which was huge. I don't think any of that would have happened had I stayed here. And through sports, we got to go and play in tournaments all over the region, which was a huge, learning for me. I think some of the, like my most vivid memories early on of going there were obviously the language barrier, because for the first maybe year or so, I didn't know what people were talking about half the time, and it was really awkward. And I think something that's kind of a theme of my life is I felt like a foreigner there, despite the fact that I am Lebanese. Like both my parents are 100% Lebanese. And here in the US at times I felt like a foreigner, but I'm also American. Like I'm born and raised in the US. So it's very much sort of been a strange, feeling for me. And that was very present in my life, especially for those first couple years. Like I remember in school, kids being like, "Oh, that's the like American girl," and I was like, "Yeah, but also I'm also Lebanese." Like, but I dressed differently, I talked differently. I remember pretty quickly trying to give myself an accent, like to pretend like English was my second language, and then I think I just sounded pretty strange. But again, because people kind of made fun of me, like. I was from Jersey. I have another really vivid memory of being in the car with my dad and driving back from a beach, and we got stopped by a soldier. There were like checkpoints in Beirut, which was very normal. And the soldier was basically like screaming in my face, asking me who the guy next to me was. I didn't understand what he was asking me because he was speaking in Arabic. So he kept saying like, "Is this your dad? Is this your dad? Like, who's this guy?" And I think he was assuming or trying to suggest that my dad had kidnapped me.
Oh my gosh.
Which is bizarre because I'm literally a photocopy of my father. So actually, if you look at us together, you know that I'm his daughter. But I just remember how scared I was in that moment. And it was just also a very kind of big reminder at how different my life was there. That's not the kind of thing that would happen here in the US. I think we can look back at that now and maybe laugh a little. Yeah. But it's definitely like it was a kind of a defining moment for me in that first year living there.
And how long did it take? So you ended up learning Arabic and French and assume you were fluent. How long did that take you?
It definitely took a while. Interestingly, in school, so in all of the schools in Lebanon, you typically have to learn 3 languages. At an American school, we learned French and Arabic. I started learning Arabic like right when I got there in 7th grade. But I was learning like the written Arabic, which is a little bit different from spoken. So I started to learn how to read and write, which I could do within a year, but I couldn't yet translate that into actually speaking. Yeah. Honestly, I think primarily because I was shy. Like I was really embarrassed about my accent and like not being able to speak like all of the rest of my friends and everybody in school. Because even though everyone could speak English, they all spoke Arabic. I was sort of the odd one out. But we had like a driver who I loved. Like he was one of my like best friends and was with me all the time. And he did not speak English. So I honestly think I forced myself to learn for him because I wanted to be able to communicate with him.
When we're younger, we're so resilient. I mean, imagine having to do that now. Like, absolutely not. Yes. But I also moved from Eastern Europe to Africa when I was 7. And I didn't speak any English. And I remember being that little Russian girl that brought those, I'm sorry, but it was smelly food, which I thought was great. But I was just like, Mom, you didn't even give me a chance. Yeah. It was so hard not being able to speak the language. And I also joined sport. It's such a great way for kids or anyone to just network, assimilate. You're all on a team. So when someone asks you, where are you from? What do you say?
I say Lebanon. And it's interesting because it's the place, I mean, I've only lived in 3 places, but it's the place I've lived lived the shortest, but it's home to me. And I don't know if that's because I was there for such formative years, or it's because my parents stayed, like they stayed. When I left, they were there for years after. So when I went to visit them, it was like going home to them.
Yeah.
My parents aren't there anymore. They don't have a house or anything. So it's really hard to call it home. To me, it still is. And if somebody asks where I'm from, I would say Lebanon.
Okay. What is the next question that they usually ask you when you say Lebanon?
Well, there's a lot of different questions. I get a lot of like, why do you speak English well? So that's always, well, yeah, because I was born here.
Yeah.
Oh man, I mean, there's a lot of people that don't know where it is or what it is. I think it was harder maybe 25 years ago. My God, that sounds so old.
I know.
But
I'm with you.
Gosh, I remember people asking like, do you go to school on a camel? And are there roads there?
Yeah.
Somebody had asked me if there was electricity.
Uh-huh.
I mean, you know, the answer is no, I didn't go to school on a camel. Yes, there were roads, and yes, there was electricity. I think people know a little bit more now.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of pretty ignorant questions, I think.
I had very similar experience when I came to university here. When people asked me, I was very naive initially. I grew up in Africa. They're like, what? Are there lions just walking around on the streets? No. Now, whenever I meet someone new, I have this scan that I do about the other person, figuring out,
what should I say?
Yeah, what should I say? And it's just increments. So mostly now you just answer you're from Beirut,
but it's interesting. I mean, you saying you kind of scan the person. Yes, I'll often take a beat, and depending on who I'm talking to, I might not even go there. I might say like, my parents are from the Middle East, but I've been here most of my life. Sometimes I've said I lived overseas for a while, but I've been here 20 years. Sometimes I'll just say the Middle East. So yes, to your point, like it does kind of depend. If it's somebody that I'm comfortable with or I know is like a safe place, then it's Lebanon.
I like how we revert to regions.
Yeah.
This area.
It's easier.
On the other side of the world. So at this point, you have had a pretty significant change in your life. You're 12, you had to change your friends, change languages. So you've now become Lebanese again. You've gone back to your roots, and your dad says you are leaving. Tell me about that.
Lebanon is a highly politicized country. The whole region is. Obviously, there's a lot going on always. Over the course of the 10 years I was there were, things happening, but never so intense as in the summer of 2006. So when that war started, that was really the first time I was living in like an actual war zone. So there was no going out. We were home, very much staying put, being really careful. A bomb. So where we lived was a pretty safe neighborhood. Like this is where there would be like explosions and strikes and, shootings and things like that. But I think it was 5 days into the war, a bomb dropped like a couple buildings away from where we lived. It dropped in a parking lot, and it was kind of like a stone's throw away from where I live. And things were not getting better. It wasn't like, okay, this is just like a 5-day or a 10-day skirmish, and we're going to figure it out and it'll be fine. My office was closed, and I think that was kind of the last straw for my dad, was when that event took place. It was very dramatic to get out that the airport was closed. It wasn't like just go to the airport and hop on a plane. So he said, I booked you a way out. And I remember being like, okay, well, what? Like, what does that mean? Where am I going? And he's like, well, you're taking a bus to Syria, and then a taxi will pick you up there at the border and drive you to Amman, Jordan. You'll stay with a friend of mine for a night, and then take a flight from Amman to New York. Because everybody was trying to rush out. And this was a time when U.S. citizens were being like taken out of Beirut by ship. And I think my dad had put us on the list and we didn't, there was like a zillion people that were trying to get out. So we just weren't on any of those initial boats or ships. So getting out was very hard. And even like getting to Syria or getting to Jordan, it was difficult. So he was really happy that he like found a way. I called some of my friends and was like, I'm leaving. I'm not 100% sure what's happening right now. I packed a small bag, not 100% sure what I was thinking when I packed it, but put some stuff in it, and basically got dropped off at like a bus at 6 a.m. on a Monday. I remember that the road that we took to Damascus got bombed 25 minutes after we drove it. And because, it was a war zone. And so my dad didn't know for a while that we had like made it through. Because I don't know, maybe there was no cell service. I don't even know. Like I was in a mountain somewhere probably.
Yeah.
So it was a really, I don't know, stressful situation. But, I made it obviously to Amman, got on a flight. I went to New York. Since I'm from Jersey, like it made sense for me to just go there. I have a bunch of friends and family. So I stayed for a few days and it was like something in the universe, I think, was starting to shift at some point, like when all of this was happening. And I guess the stars started to align. And for some strange reason, I was like, let me just go to LA. At the time, I had family living here. So my dad had 2 sisters living in Los Angeles. I grew up coming here, so it wasn't like a foreign place to me. I got on a plane with this silly bag that I had, which had like 3 articles of clothing in it, came to LA, got to my aunt's house. I really didn't know anyone outside of my aunt's. I have a friend who's been a dear friend of mine since I was, 15, who lives here. So I knew him, but that was about it. After a couple days, office was still closed. War was still, in full force. I was like, I don't know what to do here. What if I look for a job? Today, I don't think it's that easy to find a job, but for whatever reason, I applied for a position at an ad agency and they asked me to come in the next day for an interview.
Wow.
I went in and I'm going to give a shout out to a girlfriend of mine named Allison. She is the girl who interviewed me. And to this day, she makes fun of me because I came to an interview in jeans. And I was like, you know what, Al? I had no other clothes. I also had no money. So I wasn't like going to go shopping before like the first interview of my life in Los Angeles. Although I probably should have. But needless to say, I got that job and they asked me to start like 2 days later. Again, it was all like really bizarre. And
this is moving so fast.
So I called my dad and basically was like, I got a job. Like, maybe I'll just stay.
Yeah.
And that was that. I was here.
Just you wait. That was very fast. No. So I have a question about the moment your dad told you that you're leaving. Did you resist at all? I'm going back for just a beat.
No.
Okay.
The thing that was the scariest to me was that I was going without him. My mom was actually with me. My mom and I and a cousin who did not live in Lebanon. She was like visiting for the summer. So
fun trip.
The 3 of us, really fun. The 3 of us left together. And I was like, what about you, Dad? So that to me was pretty horrifying. But what was happening, unfortunately, is there were like squatters and stuff. So if you completely left your home, there was a chance that people would come in and steal your stuff. And so he wasn't willing to take that risk. That was the thing to me that was really difficult. I think because the situation was so scary and unknown to me, I didn't even know how to say like, no, I'm not going to do that. Okay. It was just like, yeah, I should probably go because this isn't going well. Okay. I also think because I was working and the office was closed, for some reason that made it feel more like intense. I didn't know what to do with myself.
You were in a war zone and your job, the office is closed. So you're like just leaving the country. I don't know who else has a story like this. You seem, I don't know. So obviously you lived in Beirut at this point for like 10 years.
Yeah.
Most people would be horrified that they're living in a war zone. Like at the time when he was telling you this, maybe people in Lebanon are sort of like, I don't know, accustomed to in some way. I hate to use
Yeah.
that word, but I feel like it might be true that
It is.
it's just part of life there.
Unfortunately, it is. We're an incredibly resilient people. We've faced an like insane amount of hardship, like as a country, for years and years and years. So it wasn't unheard of for there to be something happening at the border or for like a car bomb. This was a war.
Yeah.
Everything else was like an episode or a something. Something happened on this one day, or, like a prominent figure was killed and the country sort of shut down in mourning. This was, you can't go anywhere because anything could happen. And it was a lot scarier. So, yeah, I was pretty used to it, like used to the idea, but this was different. Like the fact that we couldn't leave and that every single day, all day, there was like bombings and the glass and the windows were like shaking. It was really scary. So it was just like a different feeling, but it's not like, I can't believe this is happening.
Yeah.
I mean, if something like that happened in Los Angeles, it'd be much different, I mean, knock on wood, but it'd be a completely different thing. This wasn't so out of the ordinary.
It's crazy to me. I mean,
It is.
That's not common.
No.
And I actually think that, so around the time that you were saying that you left, was the time that I applied to AUB. I just really wanted to go to Beirut. It was my lifelong dream. And I was actually doing international affairs and learning about all of this politics going on, meanwhile wanting to be, on the ground.
In the heart of it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Oh, how interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Always dreamed of going to AUB, so you lived my dream.
Great school.
So after, first of all, living in this since you were 12 and then going through that journey with your mom and your cousin, your father, not knowing if you were alive for a little while there, how do you think those experiences kind of shaped how you felt when you landed in LA? Maybe that's why you got a job in 2 days. I mean, I just came out of a war zone.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, did it impact me? I'm sure. I think that's what, like when I'm saying that things aligned, I think it's like something shifted in me, in the universe. I don't know. But when I got out, it was like, oh, this was supposed to happen. Not this way, but I was sad that I didn't go to USC for undergrad. Although I loved AUB. Like I had a fantastic time at university. Granted, wildly different from coming to the US on my own. I still lived with my parents and like drove myself to school every day. Like it was just a very different thing from coming to the US. But I have to believe that somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew that I was going to be back here, that like Lebanon wasn't it forever. And so I don't know if during this whole wild journey out, again, something just shifted. And it was like, all right, again, this isn't the way that it should have happened, but you were supposed to get out. But I don't know. I mean, I was really young. I was only 22. It's not like I had years and years of work life instilled in me, but I didn't know what else to do. Like, I wasn't somebody who just sort of sits around. And I had no friends. So that was the other thing. It's like, what am I doing sitting in my aunt's house with no stuff and no money? So I think had I not gotten a job, I probably would have gone home. Eventually the war ended, but I think if I didn't find a job and I was just sitting in a house all day by myself, I would have been like, I don't know what I'm doing here. I got to go back home. And when I started working, I met a couple people and started to create like a friend group. And it's funny that we both talked about sports. I worked at an office in Santa Monica with a lot of young kids. So it was like, I really lucked out with where I ended up. I worked at an ad agency on the Burger King brand, which was so fun. especially for somebody coming from like another part of the world, this was like, wow, what a cool brand.
Yeah.
It was cool back then. Um, and just a bunch of young people around. And so we both brought up sports. One of the guys, I had like a cube mate next to me. He and his friends started a beach volleyball league. And so he asked me if I wanted to come. And so I started that, met a bunch of people there. And again, things kind of just fell into place.
Okay.
Now, this all sounds like rainbows and butterflies. It wasn't easy by any means. I can't pretend that I was like, okay, now I live in Los Angeles and like my parents are a gazillion miles away and I'm just here and it's fine. I had a lot of lonely days and nights. I did a lot of, what was it called? AOL Instant Messenger at the time.
Yeah.
With people at home. Like I missed people. I didn't have I met friends or I made friends, but it's not the same as your people. So I did a lot of that. I did a lot of crying and questioning, wait, why did I just quit my job and decide to stay here? And
In that moment, why didn't you go back?
because I had made a commitment. I accepted a job and I am not one to start something and not finish it. I would say I'm pretty hard on myself in that way. I think I very easily could have said, you know what? My family's in another country and I gotta go. But I was like, for some reason, I got here and I started this and we're gonna see it through.
Okay. So looking back, let's say these 20 years, and maybe it's also initially when you moved here, obviously when you were making that journey here, it must have been like you didn't really know what to expect and you
Yeah.
were just going out into the unknown and just trying to figure it out. What would you say is the hardest part about moving here and now living in LA? You still calling Lebanon home. What is the hardest part about all of that?
Change is hard. I think any change is hard. And not having a community, to me, is probably the hardest thing when you're doing something, especially when you're doing something new and there's like nowhere to turn. Like I didn't have a support system of any kind. I think that was the hardest, but I have to say, I don't think I've ever thought about this, but I'm really proud of myself. That makes me want to cry a little bit, but I had no idea what I was doing. Like, none. And I left my aunt's house within a few months and got a studio in Santa Monica and lived on my own. I mean, I didn't know how to boil an egg. Like, I was such a lost soul. Like, it was a lot. And I just figured it out. And yeah, the hardest part is really just feeling like you're completely and utterly alone. And you just are strong enough to do it. And in a place like Lebanon, I know this is going to sound strange to people who aren't familiar, but so much is done for you. There's a lot of help and like, I don't know, I think in the US, there's always like 1,000 errands and things that need to be done and paperwork you need to do. And this place you have to go. And like, there's so much. And figuring it all out on my own was like, wait, what is happening?
22.
Even getting a job. Yeah, all of it. I mean, signing a lease for a studio and when stuff breaks, what do you do? And like, it was super intense. But I also like, I think in one of those AOL Instant Messenger conversations, one of my really good friends from home said, oh, so-and-so lives in Lebanon. His cousin was one of my best friends. So through my friend, I met this guy. And he, was also from the Middle East. He had a whole group of friends, and they were all Lebanese. And I think that changed my life.
For sure. I could see that.
It was, that was my community. Those were my people. And I had my other friends like from work and volleyball and all of that, but this was my crew. And it took a minute like that. I think that was maybe a year in to me living here. And once I found that group, I was like, okay, like I got this. Like I made it.
You just seem so resilient, and probably maybe it's part of the culture too in Lebanon and everything you grew up with. You just came here and you just made it work. You didn't have to. It's so nice that you met a community here and they were all Lebanese. And
Yes.
I'm wondering, we move culture, we move countries. We're like, we're going to start somewhere new. I'm going to do this whole new thing, but we still gravitate
Yeah.
towards, let's say, our people.
I think there's a comfort in knowing that somebody else gets you, right? And it's like the language to some degree, the traditions,
Food.
just, yeah, the food, the culture. It's really hard to put into words. But if I met a stranger on the street right now who's from Lebanon, I'm pretty sure I could spend the next few hours talking to him or her. Doesn't mean that we're going to be friends, but like there's like a warmth. We're also actually a very warm culture, like super hospitable and like overly friendly, and everybody's like always together, and you could walk into somebody's house and then they'll like have you sit down and have dinner. Like it's just a very, very warm, welcoming culture. And maybe a lot of that feels like that's very comforting to some degree. Obviously, the language is a big piece too. Not that we were necessarily speaking Arabic together, but like you could, or you could crack a joke and in another language. And yeah, there's just this ease that you feel, I think, when you're with people who understand where you're from. Because when you're with people who don't, there's a lot of explaining to do. Right. And this goes back to what we were saying earlier about like going to school on camels. You know, I've known a lot of people who know nothing about Lebanon, and sometimes it's exhausting. It's exhausting to have to explain that, no, it's like a pretty normal place. And, you know, I had a really good life there. And yeah, it's a third world country. So it's very different. But it's nothing like what you see in the news. That wasn't my life, right? It wasn't like, I don't know, sitting in the sand dodging bombs all day long. Like that's not normal life. So you really appreciate when somebody else just gets it.
People kind of switch off when you start telling them the story, and you can see it in their face, right?
Yeah.
You're like, "Oh, I'm from," and then and they're gone. Lost you. Okay, so close, so close to making a friend, but no. Tell me about, 20 years in, what your second home, I guess.
Yeah.
I would say it's third, but let's say a second home in LA, what it's like now. And I know we've talked a little bit about age, and it is interesting because when you were 12, obviously super resilient, like, oh, dramatic, I'm leaving. When you got to Beirut, learned 2 different languages and suddenly became Lebanese again. And then moved to LA, got a job in 2 days, and met a community. Even though you were alone, there's just some sort of drive that we have when we're younger, like this naivety. Tell me about how things have gone since.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing I'll add about when I got here, I realized like I'm in LA now, I could go to USC. That dream of mine of going to USC, I could make it happen, and I did. And that was another like really big thing for me, other than just sending in an application, actually doing it. So I was working full time and I was getting my master's full time. No idea in hindsight how I survived because it was super intense. Like my classes were at night, and USC is downtown, and I lived in Santa Monica, and it was just like a lot of movement. It was a lot. I also traveled for work at the time, so it was wild, but also wildly rewarding. Like when I graduated with a master's degree a couple years later, I was like, wow, I can't actually believe I am a USC graduate and I still live here on my own, and I did this on my own. You know, I got financial aid, and then I ended up, being able to pay it off because I got a bonus at work and it was just like, how old was I? 26, I guess, when I graduated. And it also was such an incredibly proud moment, which when you're in it, you don't really think about. It's only later that you appreciate it. I think that was like a really big, also like defining moment for me. Obviously, I met new people through that experience. That initial community of like people from home that I had met early on, they're long gone. I don't actually think any of those people still live here. And so it was also another kind of shift for me where it was like, oh, well, we're kind of trying again here. But But by that point, I had lived here a few years, so it didn't feel foreign anymore. I think for several years, I didn't really meet anyone who was from where I was from. I dated a guy from here and was with him for a few years. And eventually I met the guy who's my husband now, and he has a similar story to me. Although it's backwards because he was born in the Middle East and then came here. But when I met him, I mean, we could talk about that for days, but something clicked when I met him and I was like, oh, this is who I'm supposed to be with. I should have known this all along because he gets me. And so obviously, I mean, we've been together now for years, almost 10 years, I think. But that was a huge, I guess, comfort to me that I finally figured out, like, that's the kind of person I'm supposed to be with. And if I think about now in my life, like now that, we've found each other, we have a family, we have 2 kids, I still think that there is a missing piece somewhere. And I'm not going to like walk around town trying to find all the Middle Easterners because it's not that.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, anytime somebody from home comes to visit, for example, and it could be my friend, it could be my husband's friend who I've never met before, it's like we're home. I don't know if that makes sense, but I've met several of my husband's friends. I think one of his best friends I met at our wedding, and I could honestly say, like, I could go spend a month with him and we'd have the time of our lives because, again, somehow you just get each other. I feel like that's still a void somehow. My parents moved here a few years ago, and that's been the best, blessing. They live across the street from us, so it's amazing that they can help with the kids too. But having them around, I think, fills some of that to some degree. But as we get older, you don't need like 40 friends around you. You need the people that make you feel at home. You need the people that make you feel safe and comfortable and like you can just be you. And I think that sometimes that's harder now.
Yeah. And I think that's the kind of age part of it. As adults, adult friendships are completely different.
Yeah.
You have to make a lot of effort. Sometimes there's a lot of silence on the other end.
Yeah.
I know you're busy. But it sounds like, you made so much sacrifice. You really just dove right in to make it work for you. You're in a different phase of your life, so you're looking for maybe less people, but feeling that comfort of community, like home. I think we've talked about this in the past, not on here, but it's the same with me. I've been moving around so many times and I'm like, wait, where's my community? And I forgot to look for the community along the way.
Yeah.
I just sort of, career, life, find your partner and do all the things. And then now we're both sitting and staring at each other. Hey, we're each other's everything. I don't think this is going to go well. We need to build a friendship group or a community. And for adult friendships, it's totally different. You need to be in proximity with the other person. You need to be kind of in the same phase of your life. We actually don't have any friends that have kids.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, it's hard. That's why I got invited to something last minute yesterday. And me on the phone finding a babysitter like a crazy person. I mean, it's a lot of effort to have friends now. So it is harder, and I guess this new phase might take a little longer. But in terms of understanding home and what your idea of home is, does it even exist? Is it the walls that you live in now, or why is it Lebanon? Just trying to unpack that, because I've said to my husband a few weeks ago, oh, I'm going home. And he's like, where? I'm like, Atlanta? And he's like, that's home for you? And honestly, my mom lives there. And so I've lived there a little bit on and off when I was in college. It's definitely not my home.
Right.
But I'm trying to understand what home is.
Yeah, it's a great question. Honestly, I said this earlier, like, to me, Lebanon is home. Why? I think because I spent the years that I spent there were so important. And somehow maybe it's just where your family is, even though my parents aren't there anymore. So it does make things a little trickier, but that's still, it's like, it's my blood. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, it's who I am, right? Yeah, I'm American. I've been here for the majority of my life. I've lived in LA now longer than I've lived anywhere, but this isn't my home.
Yeah.
It's
Even though your kids
hard
were
to
born
explain.
here.
My kids were born here. Yeah, who knows what their home's gonna be. I'm ready to go though, also. Like I haven't lived anywhere this long and I'm like itching to go somewhere new. Couldn't tell you where that would be or what that would look like now with 2 children. But
Ooh.
I don't know. You did also say something interesting though about like the 4 walls. I think to some degree you can make your house a home depending on what that looks like for you. I've always wanted a house or a home where anybody can come in and like they're always welcome and we can, share a meal or let the kids play outside or that kind of thing. And I think we are creating that now, which makes me feel really warm and fuzzy inside. I love when I can get a call and somebody's like, I'm just going to stop by for an hour with whomever. That makes me feel good. And that makes me feel like we are building a home for our kids.
And then you want to leave.
I know. It's I don't think I am leaving. Like it's unlikely. My parents also just moved here a couple years ago. Like we're not leaving, but I think about it a lot.
So if you were to do all of this again, would you? And the second part to that question is if somebody's about to move or somewhere in the middle that they're like, feeling pretty stuck, what would you say to them? Would you make that leap again? Would you make all the changes and the sacrifices and all of the things that
I
you're proud
would
of?
definitely do it all again. I might avoid a few things along the way. I'll tell you a really quick, now it's funny story that I would avoid. Got my first apartment. It was in Santa Monica, and I'm going to use the word apartment here loosely because it was a super tiny room, and the front door was glass. Anybody walking by could see me. A family member finally came over and was like, Nadine, like you're sleeping at night and anybody walking by can see you break the glass, come in. Like it's not like I had a security system or anything like that. So yeah, interesting, hindsight's 2020. That I would avoid.
I feel like only in LA.
Yeah.
Where else would you have
a glass
door as your entry door?
Right? And I put a curtain on it, don't worry.
Oh, good.
But there's a lot of decisions I would rethink if I were to do it all again. It was truly, one of the best decisions or best changes I ever made in my life, as was moving to Lebanon. I would do that all over again. It defined who I am as a person. It completely, or I should say redefined, it completely changed me. I think I am a wildly different human than I would have been had I stayed here. So I'm really appreciative of that massive move. And then coming back, and to anybody doing it, I think when you persevere, take a second and appreciate how hard it is, but be really proud of yourself. It's really hard to do, but there's always something positive on the other end.
Yeah, I agree. You have to persevere and you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. The loneliness was worth it in the end.
Yes. Yeah. In those moments, you think, your world's ending, but again, somehow things work out. And you may face an incredible amount of hardships. I mean, I'm telling a story about a front door that's really silly, but yeah, you're going to face a ton of challenges along the way. But I feel pretty confident that when you put your mind or set your mind on something, like you'll get to the other side, right? No matter what challenges you face along the way.
I agree. When did you start realizing you felt like you needed more of a community? And then what is it about community that you think is making you want something more from? Maybe you had it in Lebanon and now you're like, wait, I don't have this here.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple triggers that made me realize that there was even that void. First of all, again, we keep going back to age, but it's not age per se, but they're like when you're younger, I mean, I was having fun and I had a gazillion friends and it didn't matter who was doing what. Like we were just out and like it was just fun. Not that I'm not having fun now, it's just a different kind of fun. And so I think at some point you sort of slow down and think about what you actually want. And for me, that obviously I got engaged and I got married. And when, like the early years with my husband, I met a lot of his friends. We had an engagement party in Beirut. And in a lot of those moments, I was like, oh, I love this feeling. Like I love being surrounded by my oldest friends. I loved being surrounded by his oldest friends.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to explain how warm that feels. I mean, you know what it feels like, but I don't know what it is about it. And I think when he and I got together, like he had some friends that came and visited, and it's the kind of thing where you're like nervous that you're going to meet somebody new who's like your husband's best friend from when he was 5. But then you're there and it's like, we're like best friends too. Like, we, you know, I don't need my husband here. Like, I got this. We're homies. So I think a lot of that was happening in a short period of time. And it was almost like a constant reminder to me that this is what it could feel like. And then having children. Despite the fact that the large majority of my friends have kids, I think that having children is extremely isolating. Everyone's experience is totally different. I don't necessarily live in the same vicinity as all of my friends. And when you have kids, it becomes a lot harder to make time for people, whether that's with the children or not. But that's been another signal or trigger for me that you really need, or that it's missing, that there's this kind of void.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting you said that because there's something about weddings I never thought about until you said it now. But when we had our wedding, I invited all my oldest friends and everyone from everywhere. So it was Japan, UAE, Belgium, the UK, I don't know, the US, of course. You know, people flew from all over the world. And it was not a big wedding.
Yeah.
And there was something about my friends becoming friends with, I don't know why I'm getting upset. It was just so nice to see, like, my friends becoming friends with my partner's friends. I sat in that room, I remember so well, and I have a photo, or I just stood up and I took a little video. I am never going to have everyone together again like this ever in my life. It's just not possible unless I have another wedding. I mean, and it made me think maybe I should, but
I know the feeling well. Yeah. Our wedding similarly was like, and it was a pretty big wedding, but we had people from everywhere. That's never going to happen. But
could have another wedding.
I talked about having like a huge party for our 10-year anniversary. I don't think everybody from all over the world is going to come to that, but who knows?
Yeah. I think they would. Not everyone lives in the comfort of their home, surrounded by all the people that they've ever loved. And especially if you move around a lot and your friends move around too. It's not only you that's moving around. I mean, we've been just talking about ourselves, but they also move around. But when you all come together, it's like, wow, this is what community,
it's really special.
That's what community should feel like. Yeah. If you enjoyed this conversation, pass it along to someone who might appreciate it too. Thanks for listening.